When we have reached the point that when a guy applies for a job as a hairdresser and a girl applies for a job as a hairdresser, it's ability that counts. Or when a girl applies for a job as a technician and a guy applies for a job as a technician, it's still ability that counts. Then I'll say we've achieved equality, that the problem's solved. But it's not solved yet. I think we've got a long way to go.
The only positive thing I can say is that the next generation, our children, will have seen women working at different jobs. And maybe when they're in school, they'll think of going into those non-traditional jobs for women. That's the only positive thing at the moment. Will there be opportunities for them? We don't know.
There are men who can't imagine a woman being more competent than they are in some fields. It's too bad, but that's how it is. And as a secretary, you run into this, because a secretary's job is to be as meek and gentle as a lamb.
Every woman, every last one of us could stand up and say, my family life is important. But at the moment, the way things work, that will invariably be seen as a lack of commitment to the organization, to the company, as a lack of corporate spirit. Although they may say, okay, she's a woman, she needs to be with her child. Well, to me, that's all crap.
The kind of discrimination we face today is far more subtle, less obvious. And so the obstacles are harder to overcome because it's more difficult to take offense at these intangibles.
Oui. Bonjour. Oui. Mais là, on me disait, on t'a engagé comme secrétaire, t'es
So they said, we hired you as a secretary. You're just a secretary. So I was the one who had to enter all the data into the computer. I spent my whole time either at the computer or doing secretarial work or answering the phone or on bookkeeping, everything, all at the same time. Because at some point, someone created a job description thinking that's how it should be done. So when I asked for a raise after 3 months, I wasn't perfect. They couldn't give it to me. I wasn't perfect. I said, listen, that's not right. The work I do isn't easy. And they said, look, running a computer isn't complicated. You press a button and it works by itself. That's exactly what they said, word for word. To them, it's easy. There's nothing to it. And for a lot of men in companies, the power relationship with women is a reality. And it's a relationship where the possibility of being a person, among others, doesn't exist. You can't be somebody. Your identity, your rights begin and end with your hands that type, your ear on the phone and the messages you take, and the coffee you serve. Having ideas, taking the initiative, functioning, just existing as a secretary is so complex, it's mind-boggling.
I once had a boss who didn't know how to write. I wrote his letters and he signed them. He had no idea what was written in the letters, but he signed them. I could have been sending nonsense to clients. He would have signed them all the same. He didn't even know how to read. But anyway, this guy was earning maybe double my salary at the time. And I didn't think it was fair, not right at all, that this guy, because he's a guy, could have advantages that a secretary didn't have. And then another time, I had to do a financial report for someone, a huge, thick document that took a lot of work. And at the end of the year, he got the bonus, and I got the bunch of flowers.
So then you find yourself in a job where you really are important. In small and medium-sized businesses, the secretary's the accountant, the receptionist, the person who keeps things running. And they're forever telling you you're important, but still they don't want to pay you a fair salary. All the other employees, in fact, are worth more. That's my experience, and I think it's the same with most secretarial work.
beaucoup de boulot de secrétaire.
So I went to Option Non Traditionnelle. It's an organization that helps women get back to work or find jobs outside the traditional categories. Job categories for women are very limited, and they're low paid too. I would love to be a technician on the road. I'd get off on that. I can't describe it. I dream about it. I see a bell technician, a hydro technician. I'm watching the truck go by, and I say to myself, are they ever lucky? Or I'm next to a cable company truck, and I think, oh, what a gorgeous truck. I'd love to drive it, have the tools and do that job. Because for me, being a technician is a great job. Great job for the salary it pays, but also for the challenge it offers. I apply for non-traditional jobs which 99.9% of the time are reserved for men. I'm fully qualified for the jobs I apply for. As soon as they know I'm a woman, I lose about 75% of my chances of getting the job. I'd like to know if you have any job openings soon. Everywhere I apply, the answer's no. Just last week, I applied to one company. I called a company that's been in business for a long time in a small town on the South Shore. I know the company. I know it's a conservative company. I knew I might have trouble getting my foot in the door. I called the personnel manager. She says to me, you know, we've never had women unit operators. It's hard work. But I expected this. She says, you'll need work boots. As if I didn't know. So I say, right, and my boots are well broken in, too. Could you give me the full address and the name?
Okay. Oui.
I take her my resume, but she says, I've spoken to the foreman about you, and he doesn't want to see you. Right now, people react in one of two ways. Either they refuse me outright, even if I have the qualifications, or they set the qualifications so high that I can't get the job. Then there's this other company. This one was too ridiculous for words. They require a high school vocational studies certificate in electronics. I have my community college level certificate, which is more advanced than the high school certificate. But they told me I can't have the job. Even though I'm highly suitable and I fit the job description, and they do want a woman because as a big company they get grants for hiring women. So you see, if I was a guy who knew about fixing cars or home renovation or something like that, I'd get the job. I could take the tests. But since I'm a girl, it would be better if I had a college-level diploma. But that wasn't one of the stated qualifications. They only required a high school certificate in electronics, and I was overqualified.
C'est un diplôme d'études professionnelles en électronique et je dépasse les critères.
I had wanted to quit my job as a barmaid for a long time. Then in '85, the government decided to integrate women into non-traditional jobs. And I heard the factory foreman saying there'd be job openings in a furniture factory. They bet I wouldn't last 6 months. Well, it's been 6 years and I'm still here. When you start out in a factory like that, you really have to prove your worth, and it's a fight from start to finish. But once you're part of the gang, it's okay. You need a sense of humor, and you can't be too sensitive either, because you won't tough it out. That's for sure. Hey, I know how to do it.
T'étais pas dans le 1 pouce 3/8 hier quand je suis parti?
Je vais en servir. J'ai fait du 1 pouce 3/8 pendant que t'étais parti.
1 pouce 8.
1 pouce 3/8, t'étais pas là. Ça n'a pas toujours été facile.
It hasn't always been easy. When I started working on the machines, first it was as a helper. And then the operator would, like he'd set the machine a bit faster or something. The pieces are big. You have to take them out from the other end. And if you have trouble doing the job at the speed he's set, he'll let you have it. He'll say, if you can't do the job, then stay home. Or he'll say, equal pay, equal work. But what often happens with these machines is that they're not designed for women. You have to work out ways of doing it anyway. And it's twice as hard, because if they were adjusted for our height, we could manage. But since they're not, we have to work out how to cope. There isn't one of these machines that's adjusted for a woman on the job.
Il n'y en a pas une qui était vraiment ajustée pour la femme au travail. Après ça, ben là, t'apprends, mais t'apprends de peine et de misère.
So after that, you learn, but you learn the hard way. Most of all, when they see that you've worked your way up as I have, like I started as a helper and then later I became an operator on the machines, then the helpers sometimes hold back. They deliberately work slower so that you produce less. Or when you go on your break, you get back and you have to check your machine because you realize that someone's fooled around with it, maybe changed the rotation of the motor, things like that. Then if you switch the machine on and you haven't checked it and you break something in the machine, you're responsible because you're the operator at the time. It's all the little things. If you're not careful, they'll play tricks on you. Some of them spend all their time thinking up ways to get you out of the factory.
The Old Boys Network.
The Old Boys Network. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and I believe it's one of the more subtle obstacles. What it is a communications network that develops naturally between people who have a certain affinity and who feel that it's worthwhile to maintain a connection.
Favorable de maintenir ce lien-là entre eux.
It's perfectly natural to have this type of network in the workplace. How it becomes a disadvantage for women is that it's difficult to get in on such a network because we're new on the scene, we haven't established all these connections, we often haven't had mentors who helped us get where we are, and therefore it's hard to get in. It's like a kind of private club where you need a recommendation to get in. If you can't get in, you have to manage on your personal merit alone. You miss the opportunity of an introduction here or having someone clear the way for you there. And that can make a big difference to your career. It's not formal, it's not structured, it's nothing you can control with legislation, but it's an advantage that carries a lot of weight.
Moi, le poste que j'occupe en ce moment, c'est un poste de directrice.
The job I have now is director of a department known as integrated management in the civil
Il y a
service.
certainement eu des résistances à mon arrivée.
When I arrived, there was a certain amount of resistance among the members of my management committee. Of the managers who report directly to me, there are 6, all men between 45 and 54 years old. None of them had ever worked for a woman, and they felt slightly uneasy. It was obvious at our first management committee meetings. For instance, there were inappropriate jokes. No one knew quite how to deal with the situation. There was a definite feeling of discomfort.
Il y a certains moments où, avec certaines personnes,
At times, or with certain people, it's impossible. Some people, right from the start, are completely against the idea. I had someone working for me once who refused point blank to work for a woman, who refused to take what he considered were orders. I wasn't to give him orders, even though I was his manager. And no matter how hard I tried, no matter what I said, it was rejected because his mind was closed. That's an unusual case, but we do have to deal with this type of situation. It happens regularly.
Ça arrive régulièrement. J'ai reçu les...
I've received the guidelines Renee and Leo prepared for you. I've started to go through them, and they're very thorough.
Il y a beaucoup de choses là-dedans.
Je m'ennuierai pas vraiment.
Parce qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup d'exemples de femmes en gestion.
Because there aren't many examples of women in management, you become a role model. You feel a responsibility to perform very well all the time because, on the one hand, you're creating an impression on lots of people, and on the other, they're often just waiting for you to mess up somewhere so they can say, "Ah, see, I knew she couldn't do it." So that's the other pressure that many women have to deal with in management positions. The right to make mistakes is much smaller. There's a limited margin for error. In some books on management, it says a manager who makes the right decision 50% of the time is a good manager. But for women, making the wrong decision 50% of the time is far too frequent. You're expected to perform to a much higher standard. But the standards we set for ourselves are higher too, because of our role as an example, and because of the pressure on us to perform. We have no choice. We must be better.
Mais de toute façon, en voix hors champ, on a petite fille, petit gars qui rit.
So in the voiceover, there's a little girl and the little boy giggling. The boy says, "I'm cracking up for you, honey." And the little girl bursts out laughing.
Sur un fond texturé. Ah, là, je l'ai-tu manqué? C'est-tu la 8, ça?
Oh, is that take 8? I know that for the takes, they made 25 omelets.
Ouais, c'est ça. Mais je me demande si c'est pas la distorsion. Ça m'accroche. Ben, j'ai commencé, moi, en 74.
When I started in 1974, I knew of 2 women in advertising, in creative. But at the first agency I worked in, I was the only woman who wasn't a secretary or a clerk.
La seule femme qui n'était pas secrétaire ou commis. Et on avait un
We had
client.
one client, a financial institution, and there I was really the key person, because I got landed with most of the copywriting. And financial institutions have never really been my strong topic in writing. I always have to push myself to do that. So I really pushed myself. I created the ads, the radio spots, everything, wrote the brochures. I didn't get to present them. The client wouldn't have thought he was talking to a legitimate representative, so a man did the presentation. And that's it. Even though he hadn't done the work, it didn't matter, because if it was a man, that validated everything presented. You got a scoop. Let's take a look at it.
Salut Dominique. Salut, ça va? C'est beau, hein? Comment ça sort? Wow! Ça va sûrement faire un... Ouais.
They're going to be pleased, because it was done quickly, the last minute. Good work. When I went back to advertising as creative director, my daughter Maud was 6 months old. And that was hell, because when you accept the job, you accept the nature of the job. And in an advertising agency, you're always on call. I don't know any other business where you're so much at your client's beck and call. The client can phone you at 10 at night and want something for tomorrow morning. You'll deliver. You have to be on call all the time. I knew that was the nature of the job. So, you're a mother, you begin as creative director, there are problems to solve, you get wrapped up in your job, you put in 12 hours a day on your job, you rush home to spend some quality time with your child, but you haven't finished working. Once she's asleep, you begin working again, or you go to the office early in the morning. Because what was most important for me at the time, is that no one in the world should suffer. Maud shouldn't suffer, my job shouldn't suffer, my boyfriend shouldn't suffer. The only thing I'd forgotten is that I might suffer. It took a while before it began to show. The thing was that since I'd also changed agencies and taken on more responsibilities, more accounts, including one extremely demanding account, I turned up the heat even more until my body gave out and I had a burnout last summer. I hate that word, but no one's found a better one. I was off for 7 weeks, and I thought at the beginning that it was simply physical exhaustion, because it was my body that had given up. I had all kinds of symptoms. However, as my body recovered little by little, I realized that I had to question my whole life. I realized that I was under an amount of stress that I couldn't handle. Everything came into focus. I felt the need to rethink my life, rebalance it somehow. That was a tough period. I say tough because it seems to me that hard isn't a tough enough word. That was a very, very hard time. When you're a mother, well, the bar is there. The bar is set very high. If you're a man with 2 children and a wife at home, or your wife has a 9-to-5 job, you can always say to yourself, right, okay, they're more her responsibility. Yes, I can take on another responsibility. But for someone like me with a daughter who's decided to devote time and energy to her, and that it's important for me, every time I'm asked to take on another responsibility, I know that if I accept, I'm going to be eating into what's vital to me. Men don't have to deal with that yet.
There
was a time in my life where I wanted to be Wonder Woman. Put on roller skates in the morning, stick the groceries under one arm, the baby under the other, and off to the daycare, to work, to meetings. I firmly believed that there was equal pay, that there was a balance in the job market, that women were respected in everything. So when I joined the workforce, I jumped in with both feet. No problem. I wanted a baby, I had a baby. No problem, it'll be great, everything will work out. I mean, the bad old days are over, right? They're history. Well, it's not true.
C'est pas vrai.